Good morning. Good morning, all of you present here in Malmö and all of you watching this event online. This is a deep dive into the future of the European district heating, and also a deep dive into the results of the pioneering project Cool DH. And we have roughly 10 countries represented online here and in the room. And especially a warm welcome to those of you that are traveling, have been traveling here to this city. It's actually my home city, and also those of you following us online from other countries. My name is Katarina Rolfsdotter Jansson. I'll be moderating this event. I am a TV host, journalist, moderator, and I've been working with sustainable development for 25 years. So it's an honor to be here today in front of you. Of course, you want to know where is the Wi-Fi at? That's always the first question, right? Because we want to interact with you with Menti. So if you're ready now, I'll share with you the Wi-Fi if you don't have it already. It is, you find it on BW, Malmö Arena Hotel Guest. That's the first one that pops up if you search. So the first one is BW, Malmö Arena Hotel Guest. And then the Wi-Fi password is easy. It is guest. Small letters, just guest. And then we have the @ symbol. And we have small letters MAH. I repeat, guest @MAH. All right? Perfect. You need some more practical information, those of you present here. The restrooms are outside to the left and 2 flights of stairs down. Of course, you see the fire exits clearly here in the room. I always have to state that. We will be working with Menti, as I mentioned, and you will be able to see the Menti code, but I'll just say to you if you want to make a note of it anyway. It's 93987853. I repeat, 93987853. And during these 2 days, you'll be inspired by presentations and discussions, and also, of course, by the 2 site visits that you're able to take part in. One in Lund and one in Høje-Taastrup in Denmark. So we have 2 very exciting days ahead of us. It is also, of course, important for us that you send in your questions. Those of you that are present here in the room, you can just raise your hand, and I will be handing you a microphone. But those of you watching online, you will have to use the Menti, obviously. And you can do so also if you are in the room. And now, it is my pleasure to hand over to the real host of this event, Reete Hummershøi, Cool District Heating Project Coordinator from COVI. So please give him a warm hand. Good morning.
So, thank you. And on behalf of the whole Cool DH team, I warmly welcome you to this 2-day event towards next generation of district heating. I'm very happy to see so many people in the room, and also to look at the participant list, and we are about 135 people attending from all over Europe digitally. So I work in COVI as an energy consultant, and I'm a project coordinator of the Cool DH project. Cool DH is an EU-funded project under the Horizon 2020 program, and we have these 2 demonstration sites in Denmark and Sweden. And we have a project which runs for 5 years. We are now in the end of the 5th year, where we monitor on the results. And if you want to know more, please go to our website or contact me or some of the partners here. We are 11 partners companies working in this project, and we can provide you with information that you may miss from the event here. You may wonder why we call it Cool DH. And Cool DH is because we focus on co-generation of cooling and district heating. And it's also because we want to have lower temperature of district heating, so it's cooler, low temperature district heating, and also ultra low temperature district heating. We look at the solutions needed to go even further down, and also what could be the business models when we introduce these solutions. And then, of course, we like to develop and demonstrate some cool solutions. And this is what it's about. You will see it in Denmark and in Sweden. We are not long apart, but still there are big differences in how we handle district heating. The difference mainly between the two demo sites is that in Lund it's a new development, an area with 40,000 people when fully built out. And in Høje-Taastrup, it's an existing area where we introduced the solutions in slightly refurbished buildings. And we have put together a program for today, which is not only about Cool DH, it's from different actors working with the same problems. And we will hear about the district heating in a broader context from EU, policies of using surplus heat, and also about moving from a regulated to a deregulated market. Of course, you will learn about the implementation of low-temperature district heating solutions in urban areas, especially here in Lund, about the business case and the demonstrations. And we will also hear about how people accept low-temperature district heating and have time for discussions and site visits. So the only thing I can say from now is welcome and enjoy. Thank you.
It's now my honor to introduce the first keynote speaker here today, and it's he will talk about this in a broader context, just like Reto said, from the EU context. And his name is Madis Laaniste. He's a policy officer at the European Commission, and he will be joining us online. So let's see if we have connection with Madis Laaniste. He's presenting digitally. So there you are.
Yes, good morning, everyone. Yes, good morning, everyone, and it's nice and a big pleasure to be part of your seminar and workshop today. And as promised, I tried to give you an overview of the district heating in broader EU policies, what's the situation today and where we are heading from now onwards. Of course, this highlights part of the challenges that lie in front of us. So the situation in the world has changed significantly, and particularly in Europe because of the war in Ukraine. And my presentation is mostly about those initiatives, what the Commission agreed when they took their office in December 2019. But definitely the present challenges will significantly change the energy landscape in Europe, and probably later today you will have more information what are the EU's plans to reduce its resilience or improve its resilience and reduce the dependence on Russian imports of fossil fuels for the future. So where to start? This next slide. Next slide, please. So I would start highlighting some of the key strategies that the EU has in place for this decade, and bearing in mind the objectives that we have for year 2030. And when the current Commission took the office, much emphasis was put to the environmental topics and in the Commission's long-term plans. And the Commission adopted its Green Deal, and this covers many aspects how the EU could become more sustainable. And one of the central elements of this plan is to significantly reduce the carbon emissions, and including in the energy sector. This also affects the district heating and business entities operating in the district heating and cooling sector. to reduce the carbon emissions in the district heating. Smarter energy use has to be achieved, and higher energy efficiency and wider deployment of the renewable energy. Those are the key activities what we are aiming at with energy system integration strategy. And to achieve those goals in the energy sector, the configuration of the energy system must change. So for this purpose, the individual parts of the energy system, the district heating, electricity system, the gas networks, other fuel supply chain, they must be more integrated and mutually support their decarbonization activities. We see that there are a lot of potential in the decarbonization when we have more system integration in the energy system. And this also drives the developments that we are aiming at in the district heating. And district heating could be essential factor of the energy system integration, and it should connect the new suppliers of heat and the consumers. Next slide, please. So what are the key tasks that we have in the energy system integration strategy that the Commission prioritized in its action? And first of all, to achieve the better integration of the energy system, we need to capture better the waste heat potential that we have from the industry and data centers and service facilities. And to achieve that, this goal, we need to. There was an agreement that amendments are needed in the Renewable Energy Directive and Energy Efficiency Directive, and there was also agreed that together with the amendments in the Energy Efficiency Directive to capture the waste heat potential, there should be also instruments available that also accelerate the investments in smart, highly efficient and renewables-based district heating and cooling networks. So there should be regulatory push and also the investment access to support the activities of the EU to decarbonize the district heating and improve its integration with other parts of the energy system. Next slide, please. So when you look at the key package that was designed to achieve EU's long-term goals in the energy policy and climate policy, the Fit for 55 package, it includes quite many and a number of different proposals and initiatives. And among them, there were also the Energy Efficiency Directive and Renewable Energy Directive as agreed in the Energy System Integration Strategy. And both they are aiming at reducing the carbon emissions in the district heating systems also. And they are mutually reinforcing. And what is also important to remind is that the climate target plan that was adopted by the Commission in September 2020 had a clear message that the heating and cooling sector can reduce the carbon emissions efficiently, and compared to other sectors, these emission savings are cost efficient, have much better cost efficiency than the other sectors could deliver. And therefore, this is one of the targeted sectors in the present Fit for 55 package, where we would like to see good development in order to achieve EU's 2030 goals and long-term climate neutrality goal. So next slide, please. So I will concentrate my presentation on the Energy Efficiency Directive and what comes from the Energy Efficiency Directive for the district heating and cooling. And the key provision and that has generated the most discussion in the negotiations of the Energy Efficiency Directive in relation to the district heating is the definition of efficient district heating and cooling. And the current Energy Efficiency Directive in force has only a steady definition that there isn't any plans to change it in the future. But with the new proposal, we introduced a clear pathway how the district heating systems and district cooling systems should become carbon neutral in longer term. And it included several steps to achieve this carbon neutrality in longer term. And after 2026, there will be a new definition for the efficient district heating, and thereafter, after 10 years, every 10 years, the definition will change, and year by year or decade by decade, the share of renewables and waste heat should increase in the efficient district heating and cooling, and by year 2050, all the energy in the efficient heating and cooling systems should come from the renewables or the waste heat. So this was the original proposal by the Commission, and yes, indeed, the negotiations are approaching to the next decisive stages where the Council will formulate its position and the Parliament will formulate its position. So there are probably wishes to amend these proposals from the both sides. Some of the involved parties are more ambitious. Other ones would like to see some flexibilities in this regard. But what's the key thing that the Commission also introduced with this proposal is that in longer term, we need to make sure that those investments what we make in the efficient district heating and cooling are helping us to achieve this long-term carbon neutrality goal. And after year 2035, there isn't any opportunity to invest into high efficiency cogeneration that is based on the fossil fuels. So this is important because we see that in longer term, there should be systemic changes in the district heating systems. The systems must be converted to low temperature district heating systems to achieve more easily the decarbonization targets. And also this will facilitate the lower temperatures district heating systems, facilitate better integration of the renewables and waste heat in the district heating systems. So this is an important starting point for our pathway towards the decarbonization in 2050 in district heating systems. This, from the other side, we have seen that some of the participants in the negotiation process are seeing that they are not able to move that fast towards the decarbonization, and systemic changes are could not be that quick because of the renovation rates that we have achieved so far in the buildings, and therefore we still need high temperature district heating systems in their view. And we'll see what will be the compromise between the negotiating parties. But the Commission's original proposal has been designed bearing in mind the objective to convert all the district heating systems into carbon neutral systems. So the next slide, please. So what's the consequence of this definition? First of all, it will affect all the investments in the district heating and cooling systems. And with the Energy Efficiency Directive, we put in place a requirement that all the investments into new district heating systems and substantial refurbishment should help to convert the systems into efficient district heating systems. And the new systems and refurbished systems must meet the criteria for energy efficient district heating or cooling systems. Secondly, where we don't have the systems and where the systems are not energy efficient at the moment, and they don't have the plans to do any investments or to change the system within nearest terms, we still need to have a clear plan how the systems could be converted into efficient ones. And from year 2025, there is a special requirement that all the district heating systems having a capacity more than 5 megawatts should have their individual plans how to convert them into efficient district heating and cooling systems. And as the original architecture of the current energy efficiency directive was preserved for the heating and cooling provisions, this also included also the revision of the requirements on the cost benefit analysis that are taken when large energy facilities are refurbished or planned. And for those facilities, the potential of the waste heat should be analyzed, and potential of the high efficiency cogeneration utilization should be also analyzed when it's appropriate. The next slide, please. What is also important from our perspective is that we have in place also the provisions that help to build the consumers' confidence in district heating. And we don't have so far in the European legislation the grounds for the contractual rights of the district heating consumers and suppliers. So therefore, the Energy Efficiency Directive filled this gap and introduced rather similar provisions that are available already in the Electricity Directive. And therefore, we hope that this building this confidence between the players in the district heating market will help the development of district heating in larger scale. So when the consumers have better understanding and feel that they are protected in the district heating market, they will be more interested into connect to the district heating systems, and they understand what will be the consequences or legal results of this. So this is our hope to improve also the consumers' confidence in the district heating. Next slide, please. So EU has several instruments in place that also target the financing of district heating systems, and there are the cohesion policy and also the recovery and resilience facility, and all these they all include support opportunities for the efficient district heating and cooling. And I summarized here briefly what's the situation in the member states when we are in the middle of the assessments of the EU member states programs for the use of the cohesion policy funds. And it seems that the member states are turning attention to the district heating and cooling, and from the more or less assessed 17 countries, 7 member states have announced that they will take measures in the district heating and cooling and putting emphasis to the efficient district heating and cooling. The budget of these investments is varying, and some of the member states are taking to moderate steps, and others are investing quite a lot to the conversion of their district heating systems. And in general, the budget of the district heating related investments is these 17 countries about 1.2 billion euros. So quite substantial amount of funding that will be available for the development of efficient district heating and cooling. So the next slide, please. And finally, what I wanted to highlight, so yeah, it's a separate topic that is facing us, is how to reduce the gas dependency in EU, and this will also affect quite significantly the district heating, and we will, I think, in next year, coming months, we'll have intense discussions on what are the best options to reduce the gas dependency in EU, and particularly from the Russian gas imports. So the Commission will today adopt a package that is describing the measures to reduce our dependency, and I hope you have the time also to look at these proposals and reflect on those when there is a time for this. So we haven't forgot that this is absolutely key topic for the consumers, for the suppliers in the district heating, and but this needs separate measures to face this challenge that we have, particularly in the fuel supply in the district heating. So thank you for your attention this morning, and I wish you good continuation of the seminar. And if there are any questions, I'm ready to respond to those. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Madis Laaniste. We need to move on to the next speaker due to our time schedule here, but thank you so much for your presentation.
Thank you.
Thank you. The next speaker will talk about Sweden. Sweden has a long history of district heating, and the next speaker will address the past and also the present and what's in the pipeline for the future. So please give a warm hand to Håkan Knutsson, SWE Heat and Cooling and Halmstad University.
Hello, everybody, and hello also to the remote audience. So, is this working for? Yeah, perfect. Everything seems to be perfect organized here. So I'm going to talk about the Swedish district heating market, from regulated to deregulated market, past, today, and a little bit look into the future. So, and I have, since a couple of years, I'm also a part-time researcher, so I will have an innovation view on district heating. Very briefly, quickly, let's go through the district heating system in Sweden. The market share is about 60%. The rest, 40%, is mainly some kind of electric-driven heating, mostly via heat pumps. We have more than 600 systems of district heating, and that cover basically 99% of urban areas in Sweden. In this part of Sweden, along the west coast, we have pockets of gas still, but I think it's a matter of short time before these areas are covered by other heating. District heating supply about 50 terawatt hours of heat. Some years it could be up to 60. The turnover, 4 billion euro approximately. And mostly important, that is, the district heating market in Sweden is relatively unique because it's deregulated. It was deregulated in 1993, when also the electric market was deregulated. And that means that there is no price regulation, there is no regulation to build, connect to district heating. It's voluntarily, and it's a very mixed ownership. So if you look at the 10 biggest district heating networks in Sweden, half of them are owned by municipalities and the others are owned by investors. And of course, district heating is very supportive of the Swedish environmental policies, which I will show in a couple of pictures. I think this is the very most important characteristic of district heating. It's really a flexible system, and I will show this in the coming pictures. We have the traditional heat supply sources, but I added some other sources. We have power to heat services, mostly from wind power. We have cooling to heat services, solar heating and heat storage, and so on. If we look at the let's say the environmental performance, this is a little bit old pictures, but it's still valid. If we start in 1973, 73 was a very important year because that was the year when we had the oil embargo from OPEC. And at that time, I will show in coming picture, basically all Swedish district heating and all other heating was based on oil. And suddenly the oil prices went up 3 times. Quite similar situation as we are in today. And it's interesting to see let's say the reaction time when we are talking about energy infrastructure. You see it took about to 1980 before we saw a dramatic change. And I will come back to the sources for these changes. And from 1980 we have dramatically reduced CO2 emissions. And today it's below 50 kilo per megawatt hour. And that share is mainly plastics in the waste, which is calculated for the district heating. It's quite interesting to benchmark also with the natural gas, because most of Europe still have natural gas. And of course, as you can see here, arguably gas is better than coal-fired district heating or oil-fired district heating. So that is a very important challenge to meet for district heating. If we look at the fuel mix, this is 1981. You see the black part of the diagram, that is oil. Sweden never introduced much of coal, and we never constructed extensive gas grid, but we imported a lot of oil. So that was a situation, 27 terawatt hour district heating, 84% oil, and then some coal, and so on. And this changed dramatically over the years, and this is 2020. You see the oil and gas, that is 0.8%. And from an innovation point of view, district heating as a let's say infrastructure-based industry is quite conservative and slow moving. But if you look at these two pictures, it's quite amazing the transformation. So let's continue. So where are we today? Since many years in Sweden, as we are a deregulated market, district heating compete severely with heat pumps. Especially large building, shopping centers and so on, where they need heating and cooling, and if they are, let's say, outside of the district cooling networks, have a tendency to go for a heat pump solution. At the moment we have very high electricity prices, so that is a kind of a problem. We we have an increased demand of cooling. As you know, combined heat and power is turbulent. We have very turbulent prices. We have a maintenance debt of the infrastructure. We have a EU policy pressure on biomass and waste, but we also see the tendency for carbon capture and storage. So finally looking into the future, I think more and more we will see locally adapted district heating systems. And then there are two very important keywords. We heard one of the words before, that is circularity. Much more of district heating must come from waste surplus heat sources. Another very important keyword is preservation. Because we will not be able to afford expansion and transformation of the networks at the same time as replacing them. So we must find solution to extend the life and future-proofing existing district heating networks. We have seen examples where the pipe network from the 60s are expected to live totally 100 years. So that will have a very, very positive impact on district heating if we could maintain the infrastructure for 100 years. Then we could concentrate on other transformation. That was all for me.
So we have a few minutes for questions to Håkan. So please, if you want to type them into the Menti. And meanwhile, I've logged in here. I can ask you a question, Håkan.
Yeah, sure.
On April 1st, I was present when Stockholm Exergy was handed 180 million euros from the EU Innovation Fund. I was facilitating the ceremony, and Frans Timmermans was there. And of course, you mentioned the BECCS, and this is a BECCS technique in Stockholm. How important do you think, what promises lies in a funding like that, 180 million euros? And the spreading of those techniques, this technique into Europe, what impact can it have?
I think it will have a very high impact in Sweden. And we're talking about carbon capture and storage. Maybe we should discuss carbon capture and reuse of carbon too. And we see several initiatives in Sweden. And honestly, it's a blessing for biomass. Because biomass will have better arguments to stay as a fuel if we could capture the carbon. So I have seen several initiatives in Sweden. I think for biomass it will have an important function, maybe also for waste to energy plants.
And there's also, of course, there's also the aspect of the biochar that we could have used for in other systems. Yeah. There was a question related to the plastic that you referred to. How do we maneuver around the plastic and the waste that goes into the incinerators?
Well, the district heating industry and the waste to energy plants, they claim that it's not their problem. It's the upstream sources, the households, we ourselves. It's a lot of work going on to improve sorting of waste. I don't think there is any easy solution, and maybe it's a wrong focus to focus too much on a portion of plastic in waste when we have around the world landfills full of waste, and we have rivers full of plastic waste. So maybe it's wrong focus.
Well, to be continued. There's one more question. We have time for one more question. Does the emissions data we saw include emissions from biomass?
No, because we consider biomass as a circular source. It's absorbed by the growing biomass.
Well, thank you very much. Thank you for your questions, and thank you, Håkan Knutsson.
Thank you very much.
We move on to the next speaker. And it's actually the first of a cavalcade of speakers. It's Martin Gierow from Kraftringen, and it's out just close to us here in Lund. And you will talk about the Cool DH in Lund, of course, and your participator in the project. So, you have the floor.
Fine. Okay. Thank you for a warm welcome. My name is Martin Gierow, and I'm a product manager for heating and cooling at Kraftringen. And a few words about Kraftringen is we are a municipally owned utility company. We operate electricity grid, sell electricity, operate gas grid, sell gas, operate large-scale district heating and district cooling, fiber network, very interested in hydrogen projects right now, and solar, and so on. We're owned by the municipality of Lund, mainly, but also by 3 other municipalities in the south of Sweden. Yes, I got this question in the outline from a presentation. I like that question because it gets a totally different meaning depending on which word you choose to emphasize. Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? Why are we doing this? And I will talk a bit about our business case. I will talk about our production in the area, which is heat recovered from a research facility. I will talk more about the distribution system and some points on the customer side of the project. And when I've done that, I think I've answered that question regardless of what word you choose to emphasize. So, area of Brunnshög in the northeastern part of the city of Lund. Aerial view from August 2014, and basically farmland, and 2 large-scale research facilities. Top right is Max 4, which was more or less finished by that time, and bottom left, ESS facility construction just started. Both those facilities are material research facilities. They are using particle accelerators for creating the research, really. And that means that they have one thing in common. They use quite a lot of electricity because accelerating particles requires a lot of electricity. And most of that electricity needs to be cooled off in a very controlled way. Very controlled way, that implies water cooling circuits. That means the energy is trapped somewhere and easy to recover. And that was, of course, interesting, of great interest to us. And Max 4, that implies, okay, that was probably a Max 1, 2, and 3. And yes, I was located much closer to the city center of Lund, and we had provided cooling and recovered heat from those facilities for a number of years. So we really wanted to continue to do that. And this is what we expect the area to look like in, what, 2035, something. And obviously, all houses will not be white, but apart from that, something like that. This massive development area for the city the size of Lund. Red line here, that's a tram line. It's already been built and it's in operation. And lots of recoverable heat, almost 200 gigawatt hours, and the district heating system in Lund as a comparison is around 900 gigawatt hours per year. And 40,000 people living or working in the area. And of course, this is really the business case for us. Of course, we wanted to be part of this city development. The fact that this was, in the beginning, farmland, had led to some implications and expectation. And one is an increased focus on sustainability. I think there would have been a lot of focus on that anyway, but I think that increased the pressure on anyone active within the area to really focus on sustainability. And that also partly means that we are expecting very energy efficient buildings in the area. Also, there was, from the start, I would say, a distinct feeling of, okay, this is an innovative area. Almost everyone who wants to do something here has the word innovation somewhere in the background. And we were actually literally told at the onset that, okay, you want to be part of this development area, then come up with something innovative. It's also literally greenfield. That, in theory at least, means it would be easy to install pipes and cables and stuff in the ground. Construction started in 2015 something. You saw the idealistic picture of 2035, and then the buildings will be standing for decades more than that. Whenever possible, add some flexibility into your system. So, a few words about Max 4. Those of you who are present here will go there this afternoon, and I will talk about it in more detail then. It's a synchrotron research facility. That means we are using light to study materials. And they obtain that light by accelerating electrons in an underground accelerator, and then there are research stations in the buildings up to the left. And like I said, lots of electricity and lots of energy that needs to be cooled off in a very controlled way, strict temperature requirements. So we established an energy central together with the university, and we started operating that in 2013, really. One thing we decided very early was to design the cooling systems with 3 different temperature levels, because that improves the heat recovery efficiency. And in a few years' time, we expect around 20 gigawatt hours of cooling here. And when passing through the heat pumps, the gray cabinets over to the left, that means around 30 gigawatt hours of heating that could be transferred to low temperature district heating. Within the CoolDH project, we added equipment to provide heat to the local low-temperature grid. The equipment in itself is rather basic. It's heat exchangers and pumps. But the control system is rather complicated. We can vary the output temperature from the heat pumps depending on if we want to put the heat into the low-temperature grid or have to put it also into the ordinary district heating grid. And we made early on simulations within the CoolDH project, and we are expecting COP improvements of around 20% when going from high temperature district heating to low temperature district heating, corresponding to around 1 gigawatt hour lower electricity use, which is of course something. Pipes going out to the local grid. So, why low temperatures? Well, several reasons. One I already talked about. Heat recovery is more efficient. Like I said, we are expecting and seeing very energy efficient buildings being erected. And it's then important to keep the heat losses down, because otherwise it won't be energy efficient. And keeping the heat losses down is easier if you keep the temperatures lower. That goes both for the distribution system and also for the systems inside the building. Temperature losses drop if you can lower the temperature. And finally, we quickly realized that, okay, if we go for lower temperature, we can start using other materials. Normally, district heating pipes are built in steel. But here we found out we can use plastic. But we were not satisfied with the pipes we found on the market at that time. They were not quite up to the standard we wanted. So we have developed within the Cool-Edge project, and together with our partner Logstor, a new type of pipes. And one result of that development is that pipes come on pallets in rolls, not in 12-meter long steel pipes. This saves transportation, this saves space. And I think that was mentioned in one of the earlier presentations. We are expecting prosumers to occur in the area. Prosumers in this case means that sometimes they will buy heat from us, and sometimes they want to sell heat to us. And that is easier to achieve if we keep the temperatures low. So far, we have built what is shown here in green and blue. And it covers the area from the furthest point in the north to the furthest part in the south. And we've started to build the pipes going out to the single buildings. And we're planning to build all the purple lines as well. And so far, it's more than 8 kilometers of steel and more than 2 kilometers of PERT, the plastic pipes I talked about. And we are supplying heat to around 20 customers. And then someone probably wonders why steel, and that was 2 reasons. One is that at the onset of the project, we didn't have those plastic pipes. They were not fully developed yet. And the other reason is in the really large dimensions, in the main pipe here, well, they simply don't exist in plastic, so we have to use ordinary steel. I didn't expect the film to start immediately. But okay, I will talk simultaneously. Something about the pipe material up to the left, all plastic, except the metal thread, and that is introduced so we can find leakages whenever we get one. We haven't tested that yet. Flexible outer coating, which allows for those nice rolls, and this is what it looks like when it's installed in the ground. And for those of you familiar with how to install district heating piping, normally someone would have been standing here every 12 meters welding, and the shaft would have been much wider, and this would have taken much longer time. So this, of course, means cost savings. It's cost savings on the narrow shaft. It's cost savings because you don't have to weld. And it's cost savings because of the short time. One thing we have learned, though, is it's more efficient when you have rather long stretches of pipe. We have made some installations to single customers that we after thought, really, they should have been steel. But you learn. Something about the pricing. We started thinking about this very early on, and had certain objectives listed that we wanted a new price model to fulfill. And one is, at that time at least, we felt from a market that customers really don't want any fixed fees. So let's try to avoid that. Rather cheap production, cheaper installation of the pipes, and lower heat losses. Okay, it could be slightly cheaper than ordinary district heating. And we have small seasonal variation in the production cost. That means we don't have to have a high difference between winter price and summer price, which we normally would have. And it's important to have good return temperatures in the system. In other words, we should give incentives to design and maintain the heat exchangers very well. And we ended up with this, which for a district heating man is a simple price model, where we really only have an energy price, and then we give bonus or give punishment really to customers if they avoid too much from expected return temperature. And expected return temperature in our case was around 35 degrees. We thought that was reasonable. And this led to one important thing, and that was a close cooperation with those designing the housing systems, which was exactly what we wanted. So in the beginning, we got a lot of questions. How should I design the heat exchanger? How should I design the heating system inside the building? That was exactly what we wanted. I'm afraid we're right now on around 40 degrees return temperature, which is slightly higher than we wanted and expected, but it would work. Let's move to a customer. This is a building which is now existing, built by a local housing company in Lund, LKF. And I think they got inspired by the innovative atmosphere in the area, because they really sat down, virtually sat down and talked about, okay, what can we test in a brand new building? And among the things they wanted to test were some new things on the heating side. And one thing there was, okay, if we get a really low supply temperature from a district heating network, say 40, 45 degrees, and we top that with a local heat pump, it's that white cabinet over here, will that be a good idea? How will that work in reality? We also installed within the project local flat stations in every apartment. That means we are making tap hot water inside each apartment. Those stations were supplied within the project by Zetetam. And that meant that we could have a free pipe system in the building. We didn't need a circulating hot water flow to provide a tap hot water. And that is a very good thing. That's very good for reducing heat losses, and it's very good in order to get good return temperature to a district heating grid. Another thing we've tested within the project, again, this is a Logstar innovation, really. It's an ordinary district heating pipe, steel pipe in the center. But those of you familiar with district heating notice there are two odd pipes on the side. And the aim here is to recover the heat lost from a district heating piping back to the heating system. And that is done by keeping the temperatures within the side pipes at very low temperatures, so that the heat loss will end up there. And then we have installed a heat pump at a customer that increases the temperature of the recovered heat as well. So no heat losses, and possibly some extra heat taken up from the surrounding ground. You noticed early on, I hope, around 200 gigawatt hours of recoverable heat in the area. That is much more than is going to be consumed even when the area is finished. So we've spent quite a lot of time thinking about, okay, can we use the heat for something else? And one obvious thing is, in certain areas, you might want ground heating to get rid of snow and ice. You might even want some heated bench to sit on while you're waiting for, this was probably intended to be a bus stop. And this was what it ended up like in reality. This is tram line platform with underground heating system. and an example of when it was working from the previous winter. You can see snow on the sides and no snow on the platform, and that has several advantages. One is, of course, that you don't need to go here to shovel snow or ice. You don't need to put on any salt on the ground. And also, you're cleaning all of the platforms at the same time. You don't have to start with that platform over there, and then go here, and then go there, and hope that nobody has fallen over before you get there. So this is, I think this is a very, rather basic, but very good idea. And we hope to install that in other places. Yeah, that was basically my slides. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'll see. Well, please send in questions here and to Martin, and I will catch them here in the Menti. Meanwhile, I'd like to ask you, from an international perspective, this is unique.
Yeah, sort of.
And how can this knowledge? Now we have all these fantastic people in the room and online watching, of course, and site visit tomorrow, this afternoon. Any possibilities to this? That this project and the learnings will be facilitated and spread into other countries in the world or other regions that might have the same prerequisites as we have here in Lund?
I think recoverable heat you will find, but not everywhere, but in quite a lot of places. And the thing really what might stop people is that you normally don't get a new area built at the same time. So that is all really the conditions. You have recoverable heat, probably. Are you building something new? Yeah, well, somewhere. Then you can use this.
But this, of course, is a very specific facility, the MAX 4 and the ESS,
yes.
with massive, well...
The sheer size.
Yes. But there is, of course, learning experience that we'll be sharing more this afternoon when you visit with the team. Yes, question here. Do you have a heat pump in each apartment to produce hot tap water?
No, that was easy.
That was easy. And the reason is?
We don't think that's a good idea. I mean, we can produce tap water locally with the flat stations I showed without a heat pump.
Okay.
Also, in an area where you have such a lot of recoverable heat, you don't want to add electricity for heating in any point because you really want to focus on using recovered heat.
That makes sense. You mentioned that you had excess heat and that you're constructing the heated benches maybe and the pavement.
We actually have a heated bench too.
You do? Okay, that's nice. And also the pavement. Could it in any aspect be possible to transport the heat to other? I mean, it's not that far to the next section of Lund.
No, when we're actually doing that. I didn't mention that, but we started by connecting MAX 4 to our ordinary district heating grid. So we have been recovering heat to the ordinary district heating grid since 2014, I think it is.
Excellent. Well, keep sending in questions. We still have a few minutes. And of course, you will be taking part in the panel discussion later on after the next session. From a perspective of dialogue with the constructors and the builders and the housing companies, how easy versus difficult has this been, and what has the sort of the key success factors been to make this happen? Because it's novel ground.
Yeah.
Basically, literally novel ground.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. One thing that enables things for us is that quite a lot of the constructors were really eager to have recovered heat as their heat source, and they. Almost everyone involved understood that there were a lot of recoverable heat from the research facilities. So that was beneficial for us. The other factor, I think, is that we decided to keep the temperatures low, but not so low that you had to do very specific installations inside each building. For example, no heat pumps for the local tap water production. So we didn't have to deviate too much from the original design that we are used to from other sites.
And of course, Xplorion came out of this process, which is an extraordinary building.
Yes.
One question here, how was this system funded?
By us, basically.
By Kraftlingen?
Yeah. We are running business. We're running business, and we are financing this by our own means.
And this is good business?
Yeah, well, yes. Otherwise, we wouldn't have done it.
That's easy. Good answer, huh? Well, we'll see. We have one more question before we take a break for coffee. Is the ground heat used to lower the return temperature even more?
It could be used in that way. We actually have in the main heating system, we are using the return flow of the district heating for the platforms. So it could be used in that way. At max, no, in the Brunnsberg area, we thought that the temperatures of the district heating was low enough, so to speak. But you get a very good return temperature from the ground heating system, very, very low.
Excellent. Well, thank you for your questions, and thank you very much, Martin. You'll be back for the panel discussion later on.
Yeah, and most of you will see me this afternoon at Max 4.
Of course. Thank you. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And now, ladies and gentlemen, we take a break for coffee. We meet back at 10:30. And when you leave the room, please make sure you go to Erica. She's right by the door. If you have not signed in yet, please do so. And those of you watching online, make sure you get some coffee and stand up so you don't just check emails all of the break. So we'll see you back in 10:30. Bye-bye. Welcome back. We have 3 more presentations from the demonstration sites and projects, and then we go to a panel discussion. So please type in your questions to the presenters that are following now, and I will save them up for the panel discussion. And the next demonstration case presentation, DH Lund results. It's my pleasure to introduce Ali Moallemi from Lund University. Is a postdoctoral fellow, and is also, of course, a participant in the DH project. So please give him a warm hand.
I'm Ali Moallemi from Lund University, and now we want to talk about distributed heating stations supplied by excess heat or surplus heat or waste heat. It's a part of monitoring and evaluation of DH in both Sweden and Denmark, in Lund city and Høje-Taastrup. Today, just about Swedish side. Monitoring and evaluation of DH can be done in 4 categories: energy performance, environmental impacts, economic analysis, and social studies. I should mention that the results that will be present in this session, it's preliminary results on monitoring, since the project is ongoing and monitoring phase is on progress as well. Here in this picture, you can see aerial photo of Brunswick area. That's main installations of Swedish side installed there. Since monitoring phase, including of massive data and a lot of results, in this presentation, we just focus on 2 installations, emphasizing on most important points. The first installation that we will talk is about Xplorion building, and then we talk about recovery of excess heat at Max 4. In Xplorion, in both of these installations, we check the monitoring of DH in performance and functionality, economical impacts, and environmental impacts. Most interesting findings during the monitoring are mentioned here. The first one is importance of proper installation, and how to see that how a bad installation can affect whole of a project or sub-project. In this case, we talk about the sensor adjustment in Xplorion building. Then we pay attention to necessary measurements to avoid probable problems in future. That, for instance, we talk about access to heat units in flats. And finally, we talk about importance of attention to local conditions. And in this case, it's using of heat pump for heat recovery. That's how we can compare it in different locations. The first installation is Xplorion. That you can see it in this picture. It's a multi-story and passive house building with a heated area of 3,600 square meters, comprising 54 flats. There are several innovations within Xplorion. In fact, Xplorion is connected to low temperature network, but there is an additional booster heat pump with heat exchanger to simulate ultra-low temperature demo. As you can see here in this picture, the heat exchanger in top reduce temperature from, for example, 60 to 45 to input the heat pump, and heat pump will increase again it to 60 degrees to provide both space heating and domestic hot water for the flats. So the flats or Xplorion building can be supplied with both low temperature and ultra low temperature modes. And in case of the heat pump is not in operation, it's directly connected with a low temperature mode by a bypass system. Second innovation in Xplorion is using 3-pipe system. As Martin explained before, there is a one pipe in red for supply flow, blue one for return flow, and lighter blue, but it's not lighter here, lighter blue for cold tap water. That it's decrease the cost and heat losses. Third innovation is using flat stations with micro heat exchangers in each flat. It means that each flat has its own flat stations or heating units that the inhabitants can regulate the heating units themselves. You can see the photo of the heating units in the flat, and also you can see that the flat station including of one heat exchanger to provide domestic hot water inside of the flat. In this graph, you can see the distribution temperatures in 3-pipe system for the flats. Supply temperature are in red line, as you can see that's a really low supply temperature near to 60 degrees. But the important thing is that on return temperature. In the last year, as you can see, since January 2021, was a high return temperature in the system. It's something between 50 and 55. So there was a problem in the system that it was detected that there is some bad adjustment of return domestic hot water adjustment. So the problem was detected and fixed. And after that, in this year, you can see that from the January of this year, it started to decrease of return temperature of the flats from, for example, 53 to 45 in February, and then 32 in March, and finally in April it's decreased below 30. So currently the system is working with heat pump in ultra low temperature mode and with supply temperature of 60 and return temperature of near to 30. And I should mention that during this time period, the heat pump just was in operation for 2 months. 1 month in last September, and after that, because of high return temperature, the operation was stopped. And again, by fixing the problem, heat pump started to operate by end of March, and in April it was in normal operation. But how the problem was fixed? The first difficulty was that the heating units is not accessible from outside, and it's just internally accessible. So the technicians need to get permission from the tenants to get in and fix the problem. But after that, to give this permission, they could go inside and fix the problem. What happened exactly? There were 18 flats that had high return temperature. That you can see these flats in the red and green points. Red points is for before of adjustment, and green points is rated for after adjustment. For example, for flat number 11, before adjustment, it had a return temperature of 60 degrees, near to 60. But after adjustment, it decreased to near to 20 or 23. The second example is for flat number 7. That return temperature decreased from 60 to 30. And in overall, you can see that all of these flats experience a reduction in return temperature in overall. In this graph, you can see heat profile demand in Xplorion. That heat supply is in the red line, and pipe losses in orange line. That it's relatively fixed, but after reducing of return temperature in the flats, you can see that the pipe losses decreased from, for example, 4 megawatt hour per month to near to 3 megawatt hour. That is, it shows a decrease of about 25% in pipe losses. And overall pipe losses in last year was near to 21%. Annual pipe losses was 13.9 kilowatt hour per square meter, while the reference value was 10.2 in the initial simulations. The reasons were, the first reason was that, as I explained, it's high return temperature, that it was fixed. I think the arrows is in the right place now. The second reason was that not all of the pipes are insulated completely. And the third reason was that one of heat meter was out of service, that it also was fixed. So by solving these problems, in this year, according to our calculations, pipe losses decreased by around 25%. And so our estimation is that pipe losses will decrease to 15%, from 21 to 15%. And annual pipe losses could be 10.3 kilowatt hour per square meter, really close to reference value, or even could be lower than this value. In this slide, we talk about booster heat pump, that I said that it just worked in 2 months. It could work, it could get back to work after fixing the high return temperature issue. And as you can see here, in last September, return temperature of fallets was 55, but in this April it decreased to 39. So performance of heat pump increased from 2.8 from 8.8. That's a really good performance of that in terms of COP. Next slide is about environmental impacts with given reference values. We calculated CO2 emissions just in April, since heat pump was in a normal operation in that period. And according to our calculations, there was a CO2 reduction of more than 100 kilograms. And our estimation for this year is about, if heat pump is all in the normal operation, is 1.3 tons. But let's see what's happened if this installation would be installed in Høje-Taastrup in Denmark. In that case, if we had this booster heat pump, would have this booster heat pump in Denmark, the CO2 reduction was more than 600 kilograms. That is near 5 times than Swedish side. So it shows that we should consider local conditions, that we can't say the same thing and we can't prescribe the same thing for every location. The other thing is primary energy saving in April. That's in Xplorion, it was 13 megawatt hour. And our estimation for this year is 153 megawatt hour. In terms of economic data, for baseline scenario, just to install a low temperature system, it cost more than 93,000 euros. But by adding booster heat pump and its heat exchanger, the investment increased to 143,000 euros. That is increased investment of near to 50,000 euros. But because of low data and low operation of heat pump in this year, we don't have enough data to calculate annual saving and payback time for this year. The second installation that we talk today is about MAX4 and recovery of surplus heat at MAX4. The purpose of this installation of CoolDH is supply cooling demand of this facility at MAX4 and at the same time recovering of surplus heat from low temperature heat source to provide local conventional district heating and low temperature district heating of networks. So this MAX4 facility provide both conventional district heating and local network and low temperature network. Here it's important that since there are two outlook or two views to this system, that we should pay attention that which system, cooling or heating, is primary system for us. If we consider that cooling system is the primary system, then heating system or heat recovery system could be considered as an additional system and a bonus system that we called it bonus heating mode. But the other view is that we consider them together at the same time as a cogeneration system. But this view can affect our methodology. And then energy balance in max 4, you can see that total heating production at max 4 from last year in red is about 34 gigawatt hour, and but part of low temperature network is about 1/7 in near to 4.5 gigawatt hour that you can see in the orange line, and cooling production was 22.8 gigawatt hour, while electricity consumption was 11.5 gigawatt hour. And then performance of heat pump or heat pump system, because it's not just one heat pump there, it's a coupling system of heat pumps. COP for heating, you can see in the red column, it's in average it's 2.9, and for cooling, COP for cooling in average is 2, that you can see in blue columns, and total COP is near to 5. And also, as you can see, the performance of heat pump is increased during the last 3 months. And the reason is that the return temperature of the system, one reason could be that the return temperature of the system increased. And now, in this graph, you can see distribution temperatures at max 4, that it's working to provide to conventional distillate heating with supply temperature of 75 degrees, and the return temperature of 40-45. But in the future, by developing of the low temperature network, it's planned to decrease the supply temperature from 75 to 67. And also, there is a heat exchanger inside of the max 4 to reduce temperature from supply temperature to from 75 to 67 to provide low temperature network. That is a small part of the heating. Then CO2 emissions since January 2021. According to our calculations and the given reference values, there is an increase of CO2 emissions by 81 tons by using this system. But on the other hand, Krafringen has a green certificate, and they claim that it's a green electricity without any emission, and without any CO2, with zero CO2 intensity. In that case, it could be count as CO2 reduction as 400 tons, but it's a bit discussable. And since I said that we're just emphasizing on important things, if it seems something unclear or needs to be discussed more, we can talk about that later. But it's a bit discussable and arguable in this regard. But let's do again a comparison. What's happened if this installation would be installed in Denmark? In that case, the CO2 reduction was more than 1,700 tons. That's, again, much more better than Swedish side. And again, it shows that this heat recovery system is more useful and practical in Denmark rather than Sweden. But the other important thing is that we should see that we are comparing two good systems to each other in Sweden and Denmark, because both of them are very good environmental friendly systems. So if we use natural gas in this regard, the CO2 increase was more than 6,000 tons. So 81 tons is almost nothing in regard to 6,000 tons. So we should consider this important point. And also, we should pay attention that even both cities of Lund and Høje-Taastrup in Denmark are very close to each other, about 80 kilometers, less than 1 hour, but they have different CO2 emission factors, and it's affect the system, and the reason is that they have different energy metrics. And primary saving since January 2021 depends to our view that it's a heating bonus method or allocation method we used, can be different. In allocation method, the primary energy saving is 18.3 gigawatt hour. And economic data, the total cost of project was near to 300,000 euros, and annual saving was 25,000 euros. So payback time can be, say, it's 12 years. But if we consider the heating bonus system, bonus method, the payback can be reduced to 3.5 years. And it's again back to our view. And here is our Coolidge team at Lund University. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much, Ali, and I will save the questions to you until, well, I think you need to go this way because it's a very high step.
Okay.
All right. So we save the questions for the panel discussion.
Okay.
So you'll be back on in a little bit, and then we'll take the questions. Okay, great. Thank you so much. User acceptance is, of course, key. And the next speaker will talk about the user acceptance. Kerstin Sernhed from Lund University is the next presenter. And of course, she's also a participator in the Cool DH project. So please give her a warm hand. You're welcome.
So nice to be here. Yes, I'm a senior lecturer at Lund University working with district heating, and I'm a behavioral scientist working at the technical faculty. So that's an abnormality in itself. But that's good because I'm responsible for the social studies, and I'm going to show you two different studies, service studies, to the households in Xplorion, and then we are going to move on to the Danish side a little bit and look at the Österby Høje-Taastrup households. So quite brief. Again, the Xplorion building, it has a lot of feature that the LKF wants to have the tenants to have a sustainable living style, so they can borrow electric car, they can borrow cargo bikes, they can borrow electric bikes. They have photovoltaics on the roof. They have a battery. It's a low energy house. Actually, it should be passive house, but I don't think it really is. But the most important for this project is what you have heard already about this low temperature, and actually we have this test for ultra low. But when I asked this, it was October, November last year. It hadn't been in operation in the ultra low mode. So this is for the low temperature. And each apartment is equipped with this flat station. It's not accessible for the tenants, but the tenants, they instead have a display where they can set the temperature level, indoor climate, and they can also maneuver the thermostats on the radiators, which is maybe not so good to have it in both places. So we asked them, do you know what a low temperature district heating grid is? And as you can see, it's quite scattered. And I mean, of course, in Sweden we have like 90% of the people in multifamily buildings are living in buildings with district heating. But when you ask them, they don't know if it's district heating or whatever it is. So it's not strange. But here we want to market this, so maybe it should be higher. I don't know. We also asked them what was their expectations, why did they move there, and a lot of them said that, well, it's because of the location. We want to live here. It's a good building, so they wanted to move there to have this sustainable lifestyle, and so on. But we asked them, did the accommodation meet your expectations? And then you can see here that 43% says yes, 43% says yeah, partly, and no, and the rest says partly. So what was it? What was good and what was bad? So they really liked the mobility solutions with the electric car they can loan within. It's within the rent, so they can can just loan it, and the bikes and everything. They also like the area. But there has been, as Ali showed you, some problems with the heating actually, making some of the apartments, they don't feel that they get the heat that they want. I don't know, it might be in the beginning. So maybe this is fixed now, I don't know. But apparently this was almost a passive house building, so the cost for space heating would be very low, as LKF said. And it was quite higher in some apartments. So there has been some problems with this. So that was what they said, what's negative. As we can see for the indoor climate, we asked them, what indoor temperature would you like to have? And you can see most of them say they want to have 21 degrees. That is quite common to have in Sweden. But when we ask them that, which temperature do you set on the display? They actually say that many say that they set 23 degrees. They can set between 19 and 23. And why is this? Well, it could be actually they don't get the heat that they want, but I don't know. I mean, it's hard with this method, making a survey, you don't really know why. But this could be an indication of this. For the domestic hot water comfort, most of them are satisfied. There has been some problems in some apartment with the pressure. There have been some apartments, they say it takes a long time to get the hot water. And I think it's kind of strange because you have the heat exchanger and it should be very immediately to the tenants. So maybe we can ask Holger here why, I don't know why. Having this flat station means that you have individual metering. And that is, I mean, in Europe, that is quite common in many countries to have individual metering and charging. In Sweden, that is not as common. So it was interesting to ask them, how do you perceive this? And now you have to bear in mind that they actually, some of the apartments have higher cost than expected. So they actually quite positive, which is good. And do this affect your behavior? This is a self-assessment. And many of them say, yes, it does. And what do you do then? Well, we take shorter showers, they say. They use a lower temperature on the domestic hot water. I don't know really what they mean by that. I mean, do they shower in 37 degrees? I don't know. And some said dishwasher was loaded fully, but that is actually on the electricity side. But of course, they have also individual charging for that, I think. So that was a very short, the most important results from Xplorion side. And now I will go over to the Danish side, to the Österby side. And here you see the area Österby, and we have like 4 different economic association that has agreed to have this low temperature grid. And there you have City 2, which will provide heat also to the area. These houses, they were built in 1985, 1986, like chain houses. They were having district heating before. They had a secondary grid. It worked very bad. It was large heat losses, like over 30%. I think they needed to do something. And I think Sten and you can tell more about the process of getting this association to have a low district heating grid. But I'm just asking them how they have experienced how to get there. So each apartment here is also equipped with a heat exchanger. That is new for them. They didn't have that before. Here you can have some pictures of the installations. You can see that you are putting the service pipe quite close to the wall, and you made some intrusion into the yards, in the gardens. And here we have a connection into the house for 2 houses. You can see how it looked when it was under construction. So it will always be some inconvenience when you dig down infrastructure. So there will always be people that say it's inconvenient. But we wanted to hear, how have you experienced this? And about the information, they said quite many of them said that there was a lack of information, it was coming too late, and they didn't really know when the excavation was going to come. They also had some problem with the recovery work. The excavated soil was replaced with other soil, which was a lot of gravel. And they had some problems with they have these beach hedges and a lawn. And some of them didn't thrive too well afterwards. About the district heating station inside, they say it placed in a good place. I mean, it's a storage room. Now it's taking up some space that they didn't that they could use as storage space before, and I don't think that they really knew that it was this size. It's not that big, but still it takes up some space. This is important because of the general attitude to the system, I think. I wanted to show you, Ali will talk about this slide tomorrow, but you can see here we sent out this in September last year, and they didn't really have the winter period. It was not really low temperature district heating. So that bear in mind that the answers are from these supply temperatures. In the summer it's low. It should be. So what about the indoor climate comfort? Most of them, they haven't experienced any changes since the last system, so it's good. I mean, some of them says it's poor heat distribution, no heat on the first floor, it cannot be controlled, it is constantly too hot in the house. I mean, there will probably be some adjustments made in the house that I think that the district heating company could help them with. For the domestic hot water, it was actually more people that has complained. And they say it takes a long time before the hot water is hot. There are some indication that on peak hours it could be a little bit harder to get the heat for the hot water. Yeah. So I don't know, maybe we can ask Uffe or what this could be about. And the next thing I want to talk about, we have talked about, I mean, both Martin and Ali mentioned return temperature is so important to have a low return temperature. And in order to get a low return temperature for the customers, we have this tariff. And this is the tariff for Høye-Taastrup fjernvarme, which says that over 43 you have a penalty and under you will get some refund. But do the households understand this? Yeah, no. We can see it's clearly that they say they don't understand this tariff. And I think in order for this to be an incentive for the households, they must understand it. They must think it's worthwhile to do anything to save some money or environment. And they must know what to do to get down the return temperature. So what is it that they can do? And we asked them about this. So most of the households say they don't understand the return temperature fee. Most of the households do not understand the motives. We asked about this. Why are the district heating company doing this? But they are actually accepting the fee anyhow. And the households don't know how to get a lower return temperature. And here are some comments about the motive. Some of them are correct, most of them are not. Yeah, I'm not going to read everything, but there are just a few. Do they like it? Yeah, as I said, they accept it. It's good, it's fair, it's good. We have some, nothing, district heating is obsolete, the future is electric. You will always have some of those. And how? I mean, this is a good question. How do you get a low return temperature? And I have just said that the first two are a bit on the right side. Yes, keep the bottom of the radiator cool. How do you do that? Well, the valves, but how? Keep on all units and not just one. That is really important to have all the radiators on at the same time. And that is not, I mean, it's nothing that the tenants know, mostly. But there are answers. Do not turn up the heat too high. Do not change anything on the unit. What? And the last three, no, but we expect a new substation to ensure this. Well, the substation is one thing. The household radiator system is another thing that could make a high return temperature. So, does not interest me. There has been to be heat, and we have to pay for it. So, and the last one I think is point on. No, why has it just suddenly become my problem? This is Høye-Taastrup fjernvärme's job, and I think for a household customer, you can actually, it's valid to ask this, because who will gain on this? It's the district heating company. So is it fair? I don't know. This is a discussion. So I think, is this the customer's problems? And that was the last slide I wanted to show.
Thank you very much, Kerstin, and I will also take the questions to you and the panel.
Okay, thank you.
Excellent. And you might have noticed already that we have a catch-the-box mic on the side here. And I'm a former basketball player, so I could make sure you get, if you raise your hand during the panel, you can get the catch-the-box microphone and speak into it, those of you present here in the room. You can also type at the Menti, of course. So type in or just save your questions, and you can use and speak into the catch-the-box microphone later on in the panel. Now it's my pleasure to introduce the next speaker, Kristina Lygnerud from EVL, Swedish Environmental Institute. And she will talk about learnings from low-temperature DH implementation in urban heat recovery. And she is with us digitally, so I can see she's on. There she is. You have our full attention.
Thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Nice to be here today, even though it's digital. I will share my screen. And I try to get it in presentation mode. And I believe we are there. Great. So I'm here to share some learnings from low temperature district heating implementations. We have considered urban heat sources from infrastructure you find in cities. And we have had a sister project called Reuse Heat. And this information here reflects what we learned in the project. So first, I will briefly introduce the project to you, and then some different ways of collecting this kind of low temperature surplus heat. We have identified that stakeholder action is needed, and then some main learnings from the project. And Reuse Heat ends in September. So this picture here illustrates the vision of the Reuse Heat project. And the vision is that in the future, cities should be able to, at least to a large extent, heat themselves with the heat generated by people in their everyday lives. For example, people use the infrastructure, the metro systems generate a lot of heat. There is sewage water under the city. You go to the office, you use your computer, and for this, a data center is established somewhere, generating a lot of heat. And also when you visit sector buildings, service sector buildings like hospitals, there is plenty of heat there. So the idea is to recover as much as you can from the city and the citizens into the district heating system. And we made a potential analysis in the project, and we know that there is approximately 10 etajoule of heat demand across Europe for buildings. And we have seen that low temperature waste heat from urban sources could actually be about 10% of this demand. And focusing on this slice here of the 1.41 etajoule, which is then our heat sources in reuse heat, we see that sewage water has a big potential, also different kinds of buildings, service sector and residential sector, and data centers. And then we have metro, which is one of our demonstrators, but it only comes in at a lower volume of 3%. In the project, we focused on other things than technology as well. So we made an in-depth stakeholder analysis. We considered the value chain for low temperature district heating. We investigated risk exposure, how to write contracts, what are the specifics with the low temperature heat recovery contracts. We have drafted business models for our demonstrators, and we have made suggestions for more implementation. For example, we presented a credit facility that could be useful to unlock the sector for investors. But I will not focus so much on that. I will focus on the demonstrators and what we learned from them. So again, we had data center heat recovery in Germany, in Braunschweig. We had hospital heat recovery from a hospital in Madrid, Severo Ochoa Hospital. And then we were supposed to recover heat from the metro system in Berlin. However, this demonstrator has been cancelled at a very late stage due to several reasons, but there are two ready to install concepts that I will briefly mention to you. And we also made a lot of learnings during this process. And then we had the odd demonstrator, which was focusing on recovering heat from sewage water, but the heat recovery itself was not in focus. Rather, it was the ability to showcase it to different stakeholders and to create awareness about this possibility that was in focus. So our demonstrator is a dashboard showing how much heat is recovered from different sources in real time for different stakeholders, where sewage water and also water from the sea are main sources. So then if we go into the data center, this is a very high level overview of the concept. Our heat source coming from the data center is at 25 degrees Celsius, and then we use a heat pump to raise the temperature to 70 degrees. This is because we have Legionella restrictions in Germany. And this heat is used to provide heat and hot water to 400 new buildings, both residential and service sector, where we have 2 shopping malls. And we have, as backup, a link to the existing citywide district heating network, a warm system for mitigating the risk that there could be interruption in the heat delivery from the data center. And actually, this demonstrator won the Global District Energy Award newcomer category in 2019. And we've made a lot of learnings, and this is taken out of our handbook. And the handbook, if you are interested, is found on the webpage of Reuse Heat. So we identified that the distance between the heat source and the heat consumer decreases the performance and increases cost. This was validated in this site. Here, there was also an establishment of a low temperature district heating network as a sector or a sub-network to the big one, and it was required for our low temperature solution. We find that replicability is limited because you could not do the exact same thing for another data center somewhere else, because you have to take into account the local conditions. We also discovered that recovering heat is not the priority of the data center. because it's not part of its core business. So this can take a lot of time and many discussions for the dialogue. And it's also news to the data center, but also in this case to the district heating operator and the system installers. So there were many parts in the chain in order to make this happen that hadn't done this before. We also realized that the heat pump market, at least in 2017, when we started our tendering process, had a limited choice of natural refrigerants for cooling. So that took some time to find the perfect one. The payback period is rather long because we think that the price of carbon is really too low, and the system is a novelty with a lot of adjustments needed. Yes, I already mentioned that we had this risk mitigation measure to connect it to the existing district heating network. Then one major learning was that data centers scale up their activity gradually. It was a new data center that was established close by, and it didn't scale up to full capacity first day. So rather it took even longer than expected because of the pandemic also. So that's a big learning, that when you go into a new data center context, you must be in sync with their scale up planning. We have also seen that we only recover part of the waste heat volumes that exist. So there could be room for more. And then we found also that it's very important that you have a dialogue with the building, the construction companies, so they build the right kind of solution for efficient heat provision. Here in a late stage, we realized that the plans were changed, which we had to then work around with a bypass. So those were the learnings from that one. And then the hospital demonstrator, it's one of the largest hospitals in Madrid. This is its overall concept. And what we do is to recover waste heat from the cooling towers. And the temperature is about 25 to 35 degrees of the waste heat. And we raise it with a heat pump to about 50-55 degrees. And the big gain here is that you can phase out the use of natural gas. And this demonstrator has proven very, very successful. And the demonstrator has added also solar panels in order to have the electricity to run the booster heat pump on solar electricity, making it even more efficient than we were foreseeing in the beginning and in reuse heat. So the learnings from this one is that large tertiary buildings may have large facility schemes. And again, you will not have a copy-paste solution for every hospital because they will look different. Hospitals tend to be public entities, and here you have to make sure that you have some time to negotiate and have meetings, because terms and deadlines are extended and can take time to conclude. In this case, sensors and control elements were very necessary to have useful data to see any deviation quickly. And then we have seen also the potential for this kind of cooling tower heat recovery. It is vast because there are many cooling towers out there, not only in hospitals. First, we were thinking that we would have seasonal heat recovery from the cooling towers, but that would be insufficient. And we have instead now a solution when it's year round. It was important for the installer to have in-depth facility knowledge in order to be able to make the system come up and run, because this was also news to them. And we had to make a number of improvements for successful heat recovery. Also here, we had some problems with too high pressure, too little water, and that kind of thing led us to some bypasses. We had some challenges with the pandemic because a hospital in Madrid was very heavily occupied with COVID patients. So it was difficult to prioritize this kind of activity and also to have access to the grounds. And on top of that, we had extreme weather in Madrid with snowstorms, further slowing things down. Then the metro. At first, we were going to install the metro heat recovery in the metro system of Bucharest in Romania. However, this partner had to leave the project at an early stage, and then we shifted our attention to the metro system of Berlin. And there, two concepts were derived, one in Ernst-Reuterplatz at the Technical University. Here we had the advantage that the heat source and the user, they were very close to each other, and it would have been efficient. There was also a convenient placement of the heat pump. However, just before we were going to procure equipment, the Metro announced that they were going to rebuild this particular platform, and that the Reuse Heat project would have to wait 24 months or more to access the location for the heat recovery. And in an EU project, you cannot do that. So we decided to try and shift the location within the same Metro system. And then we went into a station called Frankfurter Allee, and there the Metro building itself would recover the heat, and we would phase out direct electrical heating. The drawback here was that we had to have a transmission pipeline between the source and the use, which heavily degraded the economic case. And we had to place the heat pump not in a convenient location in an adjacent room, but between tracks. And these things made the installation more costly. And in combination with higher prices in the pandemic, it was not feasible to do it within project budget. But two concepts are ready for anyone who is interested. Learnings from this one is again that you cannot be too far away from the heat source. We identified that permits needed for waste heat recovery are very time consuming, especially you have the context of safety in the Metro tunnel. So you cannot really access your site without a lot of safety regulation being respected. Again, waste heat recovery is not the priority of Metro organizations or large energy companies operating in adjacent areas, which can make the decision-making process very difficult and slow. It's important in this kind of new installation to define the limits of the waste heat recovery system, and this takes time and knowledge, and several stakeholders need to meet in the tunnels at several points in time. And taking into account also that there was a pandemic, this was further delaying our process. And then also we discovered that the air in Metro tunnels is very heavily polluted of metal dust. So that was another thing we learned, that you need to encapsulate your machinery in order to make this work. The good thing with this one is that it would have been very modular and scalable, and you could put it in almost any Metro tunnel. And it's different, for example, to what was done in Islington, where the heat recovery in Celsius project, where the heat recovery was made in the ventilation shaft with a lot of reconstruction needed. And then two final conclusions are that the surrounding soil around a Metro system will decide how warm the system is. So take London again, for example, it's surrounded by clay. So in reality, you have a big thermal storage around the Metro system. Whereas in Berlin, the conditions are different and there was no such advantage. And we also think that the best time to do a waste heat recovery in Metro is when you design a new station or when you rebuild it. So if we could have waited in Frankfurter, in the first one, Enstreuterplatz, then it would have been the preferred location and a good timing as they were going to rebuild the platform. Learnings from the last demonstrator. It's about awareness, and awareness is important because without awareness, waste heat recovery will not be in demand and not implemented. So that's why we had this demonstrator in. And here in Reuse Heat, we wanted cities to inform the citizens. The city of Nice in France, was the main stakeholder in this demonstrator. And we were thinking that cities are very important because they can make waste heat recovery standard. They can request it in building processes, make it standard when you have procurement processes. And for that, there is also the possibility of a city to say that we really think that waste heat recovery is good. It's comparable to a renewable source. Yes, and then demand will increase with end users over time and throughout the value chain, construction companies and energy companies, if cities pave the way forward. What did we learn here? Well, a dashboard is a digital information tool, and a lot of emphasis was made on making the technology understandable. We were, of course, too technical in many rounds, and there was an iteration process to establish a clear message. And then we also identified that data needs to be put into a context that people understand. And it was very important to have this design process that you can go back and revisit and do better throughout the system. Yes, and then also when you have a digital tool, you have to have data to put into it. And we realized that it was not so easy to find data because not all substations are linked together properly in a way that they provide the necessary data. So here the district heating network provider had to also establish better data flows from their own equipment. And we see also that the exchanges has given a fertilization for the district heating company. They understand better what the customer is thinking about their product. They have had to upgrade the way they manage data and such things. So awareness is not only good towards society, but it can also lead to internal efficiency gains. And then I will just mention a little bit about stakeholders. We identified 5 different categories: district heating grid operators, owners of waste heat, end customers, policymakers, and investors. And they all have different values that they see of the urban waste heat recovery. So the district heating operator sees a green solution. It does not have to go and build big expansion replacement units, but can expand anyway with this kind of decentralized source. And there is an ability also to build a long-term prosumer relationship. The waste heat owner finds this valuable because they can make a profit of something that they have in their backyard and establish a long relationship with the energy company. End users are interested in green energy and locally supplied energy. Policymakers, they are interested in the energy transition, in the creation of local jobs and energy resilience, which you can get if you work locally with what you have. And investors are increasingly interested in the sector because of the green element and the sustainable investment. We made a number of interviews across 8 countries, and we see that there are barriers to this kind of recovery. For example, there is an absence of a legal framework for urban waste heat recovery in most places, and we don't have any EU regulation either stating if waste heat overall and urban waste heat in particular then are to be seen as similar as renewables or equal to renewables. We see that there are incentives for renewables and combined heat and power production, but not for urban waste heat recovery projects. So they compete with incentivized investments. It's new, so we have an absence of standardized contracts. Every time you have to start from scratch, that takes long. There is also not one way to identify what the value of the heat is, and this discussion also has to come every time. The payback periods are long today because the cost of carbon is not really at pair to its external costs. And we have the low technical maturity of existing solutions and the low awareness just mentioned. So we would like to see some policy upgrades from the policy stakeholder, and we would like to see more demonstration. District heating operators, waste heat owners, and investors can all contribute to that, so we can finally have then end user demand. We have 3 main learnings in the Reuse Heat project. The first one is this one, and it's that technology is not the main stopper of this kind of recovery. Rather, it's the low level of maturity among necessary stakeholder interactions to identify who they can collaborate with, how they should do it, and how to actually implement systems. And then we think that the urban waste heat recovery, it's a future-proof technology, and it has features that will be standard in the future energy system. And it's a technology that's here today, but somehow it's forgotten and not scaled up as it could be. Yes, and then we think that de-risking this kind of investment is very important. Waste heat is mentioned and encouraged in some directives, but not very explicit and not to any large extent. So that's why we really need some kind of policy saying policy and framework saying that urban waste heat recovery is something that we desire. And that was all from my side. And again, I encourage you to have a look at our handbook, and it's open now for stakeholder interaction, as we call it. So any comments you have on the content, please send it to us, and it will be included in our stakeholder co-creation chapter. Thank you.
Well, thank you very much indeed, Kristina, for this very interesting presentation and for sharing your insights. You will not be taking part in the panel, so we wave goodbye and say best of luck, and hope we see more of these solutions implemented in the near future.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. And now I'm going to invite back the panelists. I'm going to invite up the panelists and back the speakers up on stage. So please join me, Reto, Martin, Kerstin, Ali, and we'll have a discussion here up on stage. And also Håkan, of course. So we'll just make sure we fit here around the table. And please send in questions to the speakers. And I have this ready for you in the room if you'd like to speak up and voice your question here right away. Okay. So I'll warm up here with a question to Reto and Martin. The main differences between Sweden and Denmark when it comes to district heating, you outlined it a bit, but how could you elaborate? And what are the sort of the really big differences, Reto, if you'd like to start?
Yes, I think the main difference is that in Sweden you have a deregulated market, while in Denmark it's regulated. And also that in Sweden you are allowed to earn profit, but it has to be a non-profit business in Denmark. But you get the concession then for an area. And then there's maybe a tendency to slightly lower temperatures in the district heating networks in Denmark than in Sweden. But I think that is the major. Maybe also on fuels, there is more focus on electric-based energy supply coming up in Denmark. Not now, but it will very much, which I don't know how in Sweden, if that's the same. Pass the word to you.
Yeah, okay. Two things then. First of all, of course, we have a lot of forest and you don't. So quite a lot of our district heating is based on biomass. And I think there will be a huge pressure from Sweden towards the EU to allow us to remain and to have it like that. So that will be a difference. And on a very small technical scale, you're allowing for lower tap water temperatures. That we spent quite a lot of time discussing that early on in the project, because it enables you to do some things that are harder to do on the Swedish side.
Any questions regarding the differences between the Swedish and the Danish district heating system? Just raise your hand and you'll get a microphone tossed to you. No, not yet. Well, you'll be ready soon. See if we have any questions related to this. Not yet here. So I'd like for all of you, I'm starting you here with you, Kerstin, to share your future outlook on plans and also projects in order for us to reach the climate goals. Which techniques should we, from your perspective, focus on?
The first thing I think is we should focus on district heating.
Yay.
And not natural gas. So that's the most important thing. And whether it's how low the temperatures will be, it's up to the local conditions.
So what you're saying is that the low temperature might not be fit for all, or it's just more of adjusting it?
For example, as Martin told you about the system in Lund, they have chose to have like 65, 67 degrees because the constructors, they can use the same systems as that I've done before. But if you want to go lower in space heating, you can use floor heating. It would be 28, 30 degrees. But you still have the tap water. And that's why you talked about these limits for Legionella, actually, that we have different.
And those different countries have different limits. You mentioned Germany.
Yeah, in Germany, for example,
60.
you have they have 50, but they have this It's called 3-liter rule. If you just have 3 liters between the tap and the heat exchangers, they can have some. They don't have to fill up this requirements.
So it's a matter of adjusting depending obviously of the project and the location, and also legislation.
Exactly. Yes.
Håkan, you've been working with this for quite a while. How do you foresee low temperature district heating connected to reaching our climate goals? Are you positive?
Yeah,
What do you foresee in, let's say, 5 years?
First of all, I agree with Kerstin. From a European perspective, it's a competition between gas and district heating. If we look at the situation today, changed by Ukraine, I foresee that we will have a locally adapted system where we combine district heating and heat pumps and thermal storage. And the technologies will be different from site to site. So, because there is a risk that countries that very rapidly need to phase out gas boilers, they will install air-to-water heat pumps, which is quite easy and low investment cost, but they will have big problems with peak electricity demand.
So how about the industry that is needed to provide these solutions? Can they keep up with this speed?
The heat pump industry is very efficient in Europe, but the district heating has the disadvantage of large, complex infrastructure investments. And that is something probably we need more of public risk-taking and initiatives. Because honestly, we don't see any big expansion of new district heating networks. It's more of an expansion of existing networks. There's no establishment of new district heating.
Thank you very much. Bretto, from a Danish perspective and also your outlook, I'd like to get your outlook on where we're going with the low temperature district heating in connection to reaching our climate goals. What do you foresee? What bumps in the roads might be ahead?
Well, as you said, the limit is the temperature needed for preparation of domestic hot water. And I would think that in the future, hot water preparation would be maybe more locally based. So you make the topping yourself, either electrical or with a heat pump, where you recover some waste heat at the site. And then for certain areas, you could lower the temperature and only serving space heating if it's new build where you have a lot of floor heating. That's the common way of doing new build. So I think there will be a mixture of local production and central production in another way than what we see now if we look ahead. Of course, it's not the general picture, but that's the tendency.
It is difficult to paint a general picture in this field. But Martin, you're nodding. You're in the middle of this expansion in Brunshög in Lund. What are your reflections?
Well, one main reflection is that I like combined heat and power. And the district heating networks provide potential for large-scale combined heat and power. But you don't want to base that on natural gas, of course, which is normal fuel in Europe. But you want to use biomass, preferably, in my case.
And how about limitations or barriers from your perspective?
Well, one obvious is geography. I mean, there are certain areas, like you said, there are huge investments when establishing district heating. If you're spread out your heat demand over a wider area, if you've built large areas of single household housing, you won't be able to make it economically feasible.
Thank you. Ali, you've been doing extensive research in this field. What would you like to add to this question, the future of low temperature district heating, the barriers, the possibilities?
One of the things that I would like to mention is that, yes, lowering the supply temperature is very important, but it's not everything. We should pay attention to substations and decreasing lower temperature, that return temperature, as I explained, because it's very important and it can affect the performance of the network. And I think we should pay attention to substations and radiators functionality, because many times we work and simulate the network, but we forget the radiators on the customer side. And without this consideration, it can affect the project and the performance of the project. And so I think the social awareness and to improve the functionality and performance of the customer side could be very important in this regard, in my mind.
Thank you. Just a quick note to you in the audience, also those of you following online. When you write a question, if you want to address it specifically to any of the speakers, please do so. And I have a colleague here that's helping me to input it here on the screen for me. Ali, I'm sure that more people than I reacted to the 81 tons. And you know, expected that question. And I know you have Matti next to you, so this is sort of a joint explanation that you're just pushing it down, because I know it has to do with of course the carbon emission rights and the coupling and selling them correctly. Yes. Yeah. So please.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Well, it was for me. Okay. One thing, the real key issue here is what kind of CO2 emission do you allocate to the electricity you're using. And in our case, like you said, we are buying certificates for renewable electricity, but we are also ourselves net producers of electricity, renewable. So I think in our case, it's rather fair to calculate with a low figure for the electricity used at max 4, which would give a better figure in your presentation.
That's the reason that I put them in my presentation. I didn't want to make you upset, but sorry. But yes, but if it's one perspective that we just we look to the system. It's if we see that the heating system is additional to the cogeneration. It's yes, you're right. But if we look that's in a bigger overview, that's in some bigger market or marginal market with electricity, it could be a bit different. So according to my experience and my knowledge, it's discussable, but it would be better that we use the more real data regarding the electricity intensity, since in marginal perspective, it could be used in different sections, this electricity, and we should see all of the market, not just in this closed system of the using renewable electricity, just in this max 4, for example. It was, but yes, we can discuss about that, which one is better, and
yeah, yes. Sure. Another comment is that what we do in that system at max 4, we are also cooling the research facility. If we hadn't done that, they would have had to find some other way to do it. That means cooling machines, which uses electricity but don't recover the heat. So if we had made that comparison, I think the figures would look good anyway.
Of course.
Grete, would you like to add?
Yeah, I'd like to add that the discussion now is on CO2 emissions, but I think we should also focus on primary energy use. And that's very important at the moment, and because every electricity and heat is already at low emission rates in Denmark and Sweden, but we need to provide more energy used as efficient as possible. That's maybe the most important.
Thank you. You had a comment or question? No? Anybody else who would like to elaborate more or ask a question on this topic? All right. Let's see.
There's one.
This one. Here we go. Stand up, please.
You're up.
So I'm.
Hold it up under your chin, please, and introduce yourself. All the way up. All the way up.
Great. So my name is Gabriele, Euritan Power, DC Heating European Association. So as you know, today you published the Repower EU communication. So strategies to reduce the dependency from Russian gas. So I always consider the Nordics the first of the class in the district heating sector, so the model to look at for the rest of Europe. I would like to have a comment, very simple, few words, how to I would say how the rest of Europe should incentivize the development of district heating to reduce the dependency of gas importation, and which role can district heating play in this case, and which suggestion would you give to the rest of Europe in how to follow the example of Nordics in this case? I don't know if I'm clear. Few really a short comment, not to elaborate too much.
Thank you. Excellent question. Just make sure you put some pressure on that arm. Here we go. Thank you. Who would like to answer that one? Hand up. Well, go ahead, Håkan.
Yeah. First, mentioning Euroheat and Power and this theme, Gabriele. We have another conference in Helsingborg in 16th of June. So please check out the website of Euroheat and Power, because that is actually the theme of that conference. We haven't mentioned the carbon tax we have in Sweden. That is very important. We have a relatively high carbon tax, more or less 1/3 of the customer price.
And we were first to implement it too.
Yeah, yeah. So that is important that all of Europe introduce a carbon tax. And then today, I mean, we have a very widely distributed district heating network, but we also have investment incentives. That is called klimatklivet, climate step, that could finance new district heating networks. And I strongly believe if Europe is going to expand district heating, you need carbon tax, and probably you need investment support too.
And we see 3 local projects here in Svedala, we have in Munka-Ljungby, we have also in Laholm, correct?
Yeah.
That it's actually expanding now. And I think some of them have funds from Klimatklivet.
All
correct?
of them.
All of them,
Yeah.
yes, okay. So let's see, we have a question here. How do you expect the demand of craftswomen and material costs to be an obstacle in reaching the goals? High investment, low return rates. That's a good one. Matti, looks like you want to grab that one.
Yeah, it will be sort of disturbing. I mean, like an irritating fly, so to speak. But it will not stop. Most projects will not be stopped because of that. It will just be a nuisance.
How about competence? Because I know we are lacking engineers in our country, believe it or not, a country of engineers. We used to be at least, but we're not any longer. So how about competence?
That's, yes, absolutely. Competence is a limitation, but it doesn't stop projects. It just makes them take more time or be slightly more expensive. But I would say it doesn't stop. But welding staff, welcome to apply.
Even if you use more plastic, you need welders.
Yes.
I get it.
Electricians, oh yes, we need lots of stuff missing.
Let's see, we have another question here. It goes to you, Håkan. What do we do in regards of the high wood prices?
Yeah, that is of course
Biomass.
That is a problem for the district heating industry in Sweden. But cost of gas and electricity is even higher. So I think looking at price, district heating is relatively stable and reliable regarding price, and not exposed to international turbulence.
Of course, we have the EU biomass directive that's a little bit complicated, but do you foresee that we'll be able to transition?
Yeah, I guess in long term we will have lower share of biomass, I believe. But we should also remember that it's not virgin wood, all of the biomass. Most of it is, let's say, waste biomass, like pieces otherwise not used. So it's not, otherwise it should be left in the wood.
What we call grot in Skånska.
Exactly.
Yes,
Yeah.
the roots and the branches, the little flimsy stuff. Let's see here. We also have a question here in my script, and it goes to Martin again. We get a lot of questions, Martin, it's because this is also we're curious about what's happening in Lund. Will you continue to build low temperature district heating in the same manner, or is there anything you will be and are already improving?
Well, two answers again. One is that we're constantly working on lowering the temperatures within the existing district heating grid, because that saves a lot of money for us and for the customers. And when we establish new areas, we are most certainly always going to build them in low temperature technique.
And would you say that could go for other areas? So let's talk about Sweden and Denmark.
Nationwide,
Nationwide, yeah.
Yes, absolutely.
That's a strong outcome from this project. That
Yes,
it's possible and doable and cost efficient.
Yes, I love the new pipes, and I really hope that someone will use them somewhere.
The plastic ones.
Yes.
They looked wonderful, just the way you were rolling them out, like, I don't know what, like dough or something.
Yeah.
Wonderful. Any questions from the audience here who would like to catch? Here we go. Stand up, please.
Hello.
Turn it around. Yeah. No, it's right. It was right. Yeah, sorry.
Okay, sorry. Guillaume Cusa, okay, from Gierow, Service Industriel. I have a question for your pipe that you use in your project in Laon for the firm Logstore. What is the maximal size that you use for your project, and the maximal size of the pipe? Of this pipe?
Thank you.
Yes. Around 80 millimeters on the inside dimension, if I remember correctly.
116 outside. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
That was very detailed. Excellent there. Talk about resource use a little bit more. What renewable resources should be used? We saw Kerstin's presentation here on resource waste. How do we look at this? I mean, what input did you get from the presentation in terms of using resource waste into these processes? We saw wastewater, we saw subway excess heat. So, what are your reflections on? It's important to use these sources in order to reach our climate goals. We have really tough climate goals, and we are indeed in a hurry.
Yeah.
Rito.
Yeah, I think we see all these data centers coming up, and I think it's very important that we use the waste heat from the huge amount of electricity that they cool away, and they are often placed a bit outside urban areas. That should be stronger regulation from my point of view. And we heard that from 1 megawatt now, you have to consider the feasibility, but that could be even lower, that you have to pick up the waste heat sources where they are and utilize them, for instance, above 250 kilowatt. Yeah.
Thank you. We have a question here. Would anybody else like to add answer to this question about resources?
I just want to say something that in Scania, where we live, now the region Scania are looking into how district heating can help the electricity grid. And I think that is an important question in the future. If we should double the electricity use, maybe we shouldn't use electricity for heating.
And that's the plan for us is to double the electricity. I guess that goes for many countries. Yeah. Hang on, don't take your hand down. I'll just let them answer a little bit more elaborately. Yes, please.
Well, we do have a lot of houses in Sweden that are heated by a direct electricity only. And I think they should be converted to something else very quickly, preferably with some government grant directed not to us but to the house owners, because that will help the grid and that will help the electricity situation in general.
And just 2 weeks ago, the Minister of Energy in Sweden said, well, maybe instead of renovating your porches and your bathrooms, you should look into your energy solutions. Håkan.
Yeah, I think it's very, talking about the new technologies, the ultra-low district heating is interesting because you can capture more heat from anywhere. And actually a building like this, maybe on an annual basis, you will get 10 to 20% just from the heat recovery when you transform ventilation, cooling to heat.
So there are a lot of possibilities in many buildings to really look into
I think
this.
when you lower the temperatures, you will find new sources for the district heating network.
And this is of course one of the purposes of this project, to showcase and find and also to share and spread these solutions. Yes. Yes, please stand up.
My name is Pernille Salomonsen, and I'm from Albertslund Municipality in Denmark. I have a question for Kerstin regarding the residential composition. How do they compare between the two sites?
Thank you very much. Excellent question.
The residential composition, you mean there are, yeah, actually I don't have access to that information. We didn't ask the age, but they are living in chain houses in Denmark, and they are living in flats. So probably there would be younger families in the Xplorion building, with the, I would guess.
Okay, great. We have one more question to the panelists here. What do you need in terms of policies and regulations to make this happen? So let's start with you, Ali. If you have it, like you probably do have politicians listening, maybe some in the room. I'm sure there is. So make a list, a wish list.
It's totally out of my expertise.
Yeah, but I'm sure it's not.
Yes, but I know that they should provide some helps for the companies, and also to give some grants to the customers that they can improve their systems, as I said, to facilitate regulations for the companies, and also giving information to the people that what's the reason of, for example, the renovation and the conversion from, for example, traditional district heating to low temperature district heating, and to give information to the public, and also facilitate regulations and maybe some allowance to customers that they can fix the problems in their sites.
Thank you, and I'm sure you're agreeing, because you saw that the households were not really understanding what was happening in some aspects in your survey. Yeah. Martin.
If I have to single out one thing, I would go for the combined heat and power systems, and don't forget them when formulating different support systems and regulations.
And do you see that coming?
I'm a bit worried, but it's some way out in the future, and you're never quite certain what happens until the rules are finally settled, because there are lots of steps on the way.
Thank you, Martin. Reto?
Well, besides CO2 taxation, I think we don't need more regulation, maybe deregulation. When we compare what is the cost of district heating in Sweden and in Denmark, it's more or less the same. So I'm not sure that we need it anymore. We needed it in the beginning to introduce district heating, but now we could have faster movement if we have less regulation.
Thank you. And Håkan?
Well, I think we really have seen best practice from Denmark and Sweden and Lund and Xplorion today. Also in the Baltic states, they are very good at new development of district heating. If we Sweheat, as I represent, work a lot with other countries, and for instance in Netherlands they will have a legal. They will basically forbid gas. But it's interesting what will be the alternative, and it seems that they promote a transmission system of district heating owned by public, and then it's up to the market to create distribution of this district heating. That is an interesting solution. In the UK, they have done feasibility studies for 15 years, but not really any district heating networks.
Do you see it coming in the UK?
Not yet.
Well, they're
really.
not part of the EU any longer, even so that might be a different story.
It's a very interesting situation right now. Probably it will take 1, 2, 3 years before we see real result. But if we don't get more district heating now, I guess we will never get it.
In the light of what's happening in the energy sector due to the war in Ukraine, yes. So, you get the final say, Kerstin?
Yeah, okay. Well, I've been visiting district heating conferences like last year, and I talked to people from Central Europe, and we talk about district heating, and why is it not happening, and they say that they focus a lot of the insulation. Of course, this is very important to insulate the buildings, but it's like all the focus is on insulating the buildings, and not about which energy source you use. So maybe you have to shift to that as well. Yeah.
Well, thank you all of you. We are just on time for lunch, actually 1 minute over. And thank you for sharing your insights. And of course, the purpose of us being here is to keep sharing the insights and to push for more action in this field. So thank you again. And before you step down, I will give you a little bit of a treat, actually. And it's from a local fancy chocolatier. We all love chocolate. And if you don't, I'm sure you have somebody in your family or friends that love chocolate. So here you go. A little bit of a energy incentive here. Chocolate energy.
Thank you very much.
And you also deserve a warm hand and a big thank you for coming here today. Thank you. And the next step here is, of course, replenish our energy. We need to eat. There is lunch just outside, and at 1 o'clock, there is a bus taking you to Brunnshög to a site visit. It is just outside of the main entrance. And we'll meet again tomorrow on stage or in a setting like this in Denmark. So see you then, and thank you for today.